You're a new diver? Actually, you're not a new diver yet, but you're thinking about becoming a diver. In this episode, we cover everything about the open water diver experience, from the paperwork, the registration, the e-learning, the pool sessions, the open water checkouts, and everything in between. I'm Diver Dave. I'm still in the dive lab, and you know I've got coffee. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and of course today's episode is all about the open water diver experience from start to finish. But before we go there, the question I have is, how do you even know if scuba is going to be a good fit for you? Is there a way to get a taste test before actually committing to the actual course? And the answer is yes. All of the agencies will offer up a Discover Scuba experience. In the PADI side, we call it a DSD. And that is essentially a 30-minute to an hour session in the pool that is led by an instructor or a certified dive master. And it'll kind of walk you through a little bit of the taste test for the scuba experience. This is good in many ways because first, it gives you an idea of what it's going to feel like to breathe underwater. It actually is pretty cool. Second, it walks you through some of the basic skills, some of the masks, some of the reg stuff, starting to feel what buoyancy feels like. But all of it is in a guided way, and it's just enough to sort of allow you to answer the question, do you think this is a hobby you would want to pursue? I will say that I have a very good buddy who came in to help me while I was doing my dive master internship and learning to do Discover Scuba sessions. And I was really hoping that the scuba hobby was going to catch on with him because I figured, hey, now we could both do this together. But I have to say that the experience for him was just not great. He got through the DSD session, and I really appreciate him coming out and helping me out, but I could tell, like, this scuba thing was not for him. So it was a good example of where a DSD allowed him to do the taste test without the full commit, just so that he could gauge interest levels. And then, of course, for him, it just was not the way forward. So I would highly encourage that if you're kind of on the fence for the open water diver course, take a Discover Scuba session first. Talk to your local dive shop because they always have ones on the go. And it might be a really good way of gauging whether or not you feel this is for you. Now that we've figured out we want to be open water divers, the next question is how? What does the path look like? Path 1 is do the certification in a group setting / course versus working with a private instructor in a one-on-one type of setting. There's going to be advantages and disadvantages to both. Of course, a one-on-one instructor is going to cost more than the group, but it will also allow you the time and kind of remove the clock component so that you have time to really deeply refine the skills or maybe some of the areas that you may need to work on. Versus the group setting, and depending on how you learn, tends to move pretty quickly, especially in the pool setting, because most local dive shops only have so much pool time allotted to them for that course. So again, it really comes down to the way you want to learn, and then of course budget. So something to keep in mind. But regardless, if it's a group or a private instructor approach, the requirements, the skills, the standards, all of that remain the same. So what's next? Well, because I'm a PADI instructor, I'm only going to speak to the PADI process. But now you are going to go into your local dive shop and you're going to say, hey, I would love to take the open water diver course. And they will work with you to get an online PADI account and get you registered for the course. And then comes some paperwork. And I have good news and I have some bad news. It used to be that we had to fill out all the paperwork manually. So the continuing education, the liability release, and the medical evaluation form all had to be done manually and then stored manually in the dive shop. Well, the good news is that is all gone. It can all be done online through your PADI account, which is great. The only thing you may have to still do manually is the medical piece, depending on how you fill out the medical questionnaire. But again, your local dive shop can help you and walk you through that process. But really good on PADI to the fact that they've changed the process and now all of the paperwork can be stored electronically online in the PADI account. That has made life really easy from an instructor perspective. Now that we've got our paperwork filled in, we've got our online access, and we've got the dates figured out with the local dive shop, the next piece is the PADI Open Water Diver e-learning portion of the course. Now, this is where, as an instructor, sometimes it gets a little stressful. you want to plan for about 3 to 4 evenings worth of work in order to get through the e-learning portion of the course. That doesn't sound like a lot, and I'm not sure why, but there's always a tendency for students to push this to the last minute. Take your time and really go through the information and the coursework. If you're just rushing through the coursework, trust me, you're not really doing yourself any favors, and you're also giving your instructor a bit of a glimpse into your approach of how you're going to handle this open water diver certification. That's all I'm going to say on that. I always like to say that the e-learning portion of the course is probably the toughest, only because there's no diving. You're learning everything about diving, the physics, the physiology, the dive gear, the dive skills, but there's no diving to really keep that interest level up. So once you get through the 3 to 4 evenings worth of work, trust me, it's going to get a ton more fun. One last point I'll make on the e-learning is that it needs to be completed before any pool sessions can be completed. So before we can even put one toe in the pool, all of your PADI paperwork has to be completed. Medical questionnaire, the continuing education, the liability waiver, all of your e-learning has to be checked off and reviewed to make sure that you've passed and understood the content. Once we can get through all of that, then it's time to talk about the pool. We are almost ready to dive. That's pretty exciting considering all we've done so far is talk about diving. And I guess we're still talking about diving. And so now we got to head into the local dive shop and get right sized and fitted for all the dive gear that we are going to use for our confined water pool sessions. How is the dive gear going to get from the shop to the pool site? And if the answer is the dive shop takes care of all of it, perfect. You've got nothing else to worry about. This is also something that I do for all of my private students, as I don't want them worrying about how to transport the gear. But if the answer is you, the student, are responsible for picking up the dive gear at the shop and then transporting it and getting it to the pool site, this is now a little bit more of a challenge, because don't forget, every day you need 2 tanks, so that's 4 tanks in total. Now you've got your BCD, then you've got the boots, then you've got the reg set. Now you got fins, masks, snorkel, and anything else that you may be thinking about taking with you to the pool site. This now becomes a fairly big undertaking in terms of getting the gear to the pool site from your car. And every course, I see students struggle with this. And I'm going to recommend at this point that you invest in an equipment cart that's going to allow you to move the equipment from your car to the pool site and back in a much easier way. And I'll post a link right here. They are pretty inexpensive. I think about 80 or 90 bucks Canadian gets you a cart that's going to work. And it won't just work for the pool sessions, but then as a new diver, you get to use it down the road as you're moving gear between your car and the dive site. So it's a real handy investment. Most of the shops will encourage you to buy your own mask before the pool sessions start, and it's a great idea because masks are a custom fit, and if you have a high quality mask, it will most likely reduce some of the areas of stress during the time of your course. We covered a fair bit there, so let's recap. Number 1, work with the local dive shop, head on in there and get right size for all the rental gear that you're going to use. Number 2, find out how is the equipment going to get shuttled back and forth between the dive site and the shop. And number 3 is take the time and buy a quality mask. You won't regret it. It is finally day 1 of our confined water pool session, and we are a little bit nervous and a little bit stressed. And like I said in a previous video, none of us were dive gurus right out of the gate. We were all in the very spot that you are right now. A few things to remember to take with you to the pool: towel, drinking water, slippers or waterproof sandals, and change of clothes. All of this will help your experience. Next up is go find your gear, whether or not you brought it with you or it was dropped off by the shop. Lay it all out and get it ready, and go find your instructor and the dive master for the course. Once you've got the intros done, the students, the dive masters, the instructors, you're probably going to do the in-water skills next, which is a 200-meter nonstop swim, but it's not timed, and then also a 10-minute water tread just to show that you can maintain your control above surface. So over the course of the next 2 days, you have to be able to demonstrate that you can build and tear down your dive kit at least 5 times. So most likely what you're going to work on next is building up your dive kit to get it ready for some shallow end instruction. Once our dive kits are built, we can work with our buddy, we can get them on, and make our way over to the shallow end. For most of the group, This will be the first time you are experiencing breathing underwater on a regulator, so it's going to be very cool. And from a skill perspective, they're going to be very basic skills. It might be a partial mask flood, it might be a low pressure disconnect and reconnect, it might be some regulator breathing. This is just your chance to sort of get used to it, get the feel, do a little bit of a test swim in 5 feet of water, and start to understand that buoyancy control. And if you've watched any of the other videos, you will understand that the buoyancy control is going to be the number one skill that you are going to have to master over the course of your dive journey. But it won't be today. Once we have gotten through the shallow water experience, the group will most likely move over to the deep end. And this is really where we will start to appreciate the scuba awesomeness. And we will spend the remaining of our time in the deep end over the next 2 days, reviewing, learning, and demonstrating 24 essential dive skills that PADI has defined in their standards to be an open water diver. We won't cover all 24 skills, of course, but I will post a link below that shows all of them. The dive skill that I think causes the most stress is anything related with the mask. Whether or not it's a partial flood and clearing, a full flood and clearing, it could be a mask removal, replace, and then clearing, but anything related to the mask has a tendency to cause stress. The second area I would think is anything to do with the regulator, whether or not it's taking it out and then having to recover it. But the free flow is something because in the beginning, we don't trust it. And if we don't trust it, it means it probably stresses us out. I know the free flow for me, I was like, I don't even understand how that works, but it does work. And once you've done it a couple of times, then you start to get some confidence in it and the stress levels will come down. And then on day 2, I think it's probably the dive kit removal and then put back on. That one seems to cause the most stress that I've seen. Overall, all of these dive skills are very doable. They just need practice. And once you've got the hang of it, the stress levels will come way down. But the good news is, once you've gotten through day 2 of your confined water pool sessions and you've gotten through all of the skills and you've been able to demonstrate competency, then you will be ready for your open water checkouts. And then you have a decision to make. Find out about that in the next segment. Before we get too far into this segment, I know I talked about in the last segment that we have a decision to make. And that decision is, do we do our open water checkouts here locally with our local dive shop, or do we do our checkouts down south with a dive shop down there? The question I will ask next is, do you plan on doing a lot of diving locally, or do you kind of see yourself as more of a down south type of diver? If you are going to be more of a down south diver, then of course, do your checkouts in nice, warm Caribbean water. It's a great experience. But if you are thinking that you're going to do a lot of diving locally, then I would encourage you to take your checkouts with your local dive shop in the local dive spots because it will prepare you for what's to come. As a side note, I did my open water checkouts down south with Bahama Divers out of Nassau. It was great, don't get me wrong. Warm water, great visibility, whole experience was pretty good. But it did not prepare me for the local diving that I wanted to come back and start doing. So again, if you think you're going to do a lot of local diving, I would encourage you to actually do your checkouts with your local dive shop. What does open water checkouts even mean? We have to take a pause and quickly talk about open water checkout weekends and how we prepare, especially up here in the north. It's probably a guarantee that you're going to do it in a wetsuit. And so after dive 1 and dive 2, you're going to be cold. So bring lots of warm clothing. If the weather turns, bring some sort of rain poncho so that you can keep yourself dry. A towel, maybe even a chair to sit on so that when you're taking feedback or listening to the dive briefings, you'll be comfortable. Bring some snacks, and of course, you always want to stay hydrated. Well, it's 4 dives over 2 days, which means that's 2 dives a day. And for the most part, you've done all of the skills except one. We add in some basic compass navigation at the surface, and then also a reciprocal swim at depth. The CISA skill is also changed up a bit for a bit more realistic scenario where we head towards the surface. But other than that, all of the other skills you have already demonstrated competency in the pool. So that's good. So where does the stress come from? Well, if you think about here in the St. Lawrence River, we have students that are moving from a very nice warm pool into a mid-60-degree water at best. We have low visibility, sometimes there's current, and they're also having to wear 7mm wetsuits and a whole lot more lead. That is really what causes the stress, because now they feel a little more uncomfortable. But after day 1, they come back on day 2, and you can see now they're kind of ready for it. Day 2 is kind of a rinse and repeat of just going through all of the other remaining skills. But by the end of the day, you're exhausted. But if you've shown competency, guess what? Congratulations, you have now achieved your open water diver certification, which is really awesome. But that is where the fun starts and the practice begins. Practice hard, dive safe. You just gotta put some stuff on tape, man. You just gotta put it on tape. I'm a diver, Dave. I'm a diver, Dave, and I'm holding up a coffee. I mean, let's try it one more time. And we've got I've got a squeaky chair. Take you through, and I don't hit that. Here we go again. Pool session. Pool session. And now we have to walk to our local dive shop. I mean, walk. I guess we could walk. It'd probably be helpful if you had a car. I mean, the bus is a little sketchy. Yeah, car, no walk. Man, I am so struggling with confined water pool. It's confined water pool session. For the love of God. Confined water pool session. Confined water. Look at this. Little WD-40, 613 dive 1, squeaky chair 0. I mean, the blooper reel right now is, I have too many bloopers. It's just like the blooper reel is growing. I don't even have any coffee left.